can be really pulled in a lot of conflicting directions when you are a parent and a business owner. It doesn't always feel good. Instead of trying to multitask, you really have to become very good at doing it all separately.
Welcome to An Entrepreneur's Vibes, the podcast that gives insight into the minds of visionary entrepreneurs and business leaders. Brought to you by The Right Direction, a leading professional and technical writing company based in North America. Each episode, we explore the stories and experiences of those who dared to dream, took the leap, and built their own empires. Join us in uncovering the secrets to success and lessons learned along the way. So if you're just starting out your entrepreneurial journey or you're already a seasoned business pro, you'll find inspiration, knowledge, and good vibes right here. Today's guest is the dynamic co-founder of the digital marketing agency Space Creatorz. Our guest, along with her business partner, launched Space Creatorz in January of 2021, transforming their personal experiences in toxic work environments into a thriving company that focuses on creating healthy, balanced work-life harmony. Our guest is also the host of the Cool, Calm, and Rich podcast, where she shares her journey of building a successful business with soul. Get ready to dive deep into her inspiring story and gain valuable insights into entrepreneurship, branding, and finding balance in the business hustle. Welcome to the show, Janette Downie. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. It's always really funny to hear that kind of said back to you. And even though it's things that you know about yourself, I'm like, yep, that is true, but it's very cool to hear it said back. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so excited. I have so much questions about like the branding, the cool, calm, rich. I love that and everything that goes into
Thank
creating the
you.
digital agency, Space Creators. So, could you tell us, please, like a little bit about your background and what inspired you to leave the corporate world back in 2015?
Yeah, sure. So I think I've always been a creative person. I think back to being a kid and my interests were always aligned with creative things. I wasn't big into sports. I loved dance, I loved music, I loved writing, acting, all of those things. And I think being a creative followed me throughout my whole life. And as I kind of went through school and went into university, I studied English though, because I thought that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went through my degree thinking I was going to go to teachers college after school. And by the time I finished school, I realized I do not want to be a teacher. I have no interest in going that way. I had spent several summers working full time with kids and I loved it. I loved the experience, but I realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do every day for the rest of my life. So I had no plan B, no backup, and I started working in restaurants coming out of university. I was a host, I was a server, a bartender, and through that experience, restaurants were just sort of starting to get onto social media, experiment with their online presence, and my role ended up taking on a lot of that responsibility, especially when I would work as a hostess in restaurants. That would be like an additional thing that I would need to take on and do. So I started getting familiar with it way back then. But even that was before I transitioned any of those skills into business. And I worked in restaurants for about 5 years and I worked my way up. I got a promotion once a year, every year for 5 years. And then I kind of felt like I had made it in the corporate world. I felt like I had gotten to the top. I was making good money. I worked at head office. I wasn't a server anymore. I had like gotten out of that, but I worked in hospitality and event sales management. And I'm telling you, I think it was 2 months into my kind of biggest promotion, my biggest job in corporate, that I just had this sinking feeling that this is just not for me. I was commuting 2 hours to work in each direction. When I got there, I wasn't loving what I was doing. I didn't feel fueled or, passionate to help the people that I was working with. And I just knew that it wasn't going to be the direction for me. And luckily, I had started experimenting with photography on the side. And I was thinking, in alignment with not wanting to be in corporate anymore, that, well, maybe I could finally start pursuing something creative and maybe I could make something out of this photography. And so I wanted to start doing that. Obviously, I couldn't do it full time right at first, but I started part time doing photo shoots, taking on any work that I could. And I just did serving at the same time to supplement my income. So I kind of went back into that, but it wasn't long. And I feel very lucky and very fortunate that it wasn't too long before I was able to do photography full time. I had made it a goal of being able to do that exclusively in 3 years, and I did it in one. So I was pretty happy and pretty proud of myself to be able to transition into that within 1 year of starting the business. And I did that. I did photography for 10 years, happily, lovingly, before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, everything changed. The world of photography for me and where I lived really shut down. We weren't even allowed to be outside with other people where I lived. And so that was just not an option. And that was where I started to explore what else could be something that I could do, and transitioned into working online as a virtual assistant, which over time snowballed into the agency and working with my partner. So it's a bit of a long journey into entrepreneurship, but a fun one. And I did try the corporate thing, and yeah, it was very quickly not for me.
I feel like a lot of people would really relate to, the hardships of going to work every day, the commute, like working with so many different people and not having feeling that like you're not in control somehow. And I love that you got
Mhm.
in touch with your creative side, and I think it takes a lot of strength to make that like change from like something that feels very, very safe into something that you're not really sure if you're even going to succeed in. And I think a lot of people need to understand that it does take time, like it did with you, but with
Yeah.
enough perseverance, it does happen. And I'm really happy that, you can share that story with us today. And could you tell us, like, when you finally transitioned to photography, like, what were the key lessons that you took from the first business? And what would you say are like the differences between going into that first entrepreneurship and working in corporate?
It's a great question. The neat thing about starting your first business, and especially a creative business, and I kind of laugh when I think back on it now, is I didn't even know I was starting a business, to be honest with you. Like when I started photography, it was like I was going to chase my passion, right? Like I was going to go after my dream of doing creative work. And I didn't think like, oh, I'm starting a business to grow a business and to make an impact in that way. But very quickly, through having a business, I realized how much more goes into that than just providing the service that you want to provide. You very quickly realize you have to have contracts and invoicing and systems and operations, and you then need to have a website, a portfolio, social media. You need to promote yourself, market yourself, and the list goes on and on. You have to pay taxes, right? There's so much more that goes into it that I didn't necessarily realize that at all when I was starting. So I started to see that and realize, okay, being a business owner means wearing a lot more hats than just doing the thing that you want to do, right? It'd be great if you could run a business and just do the one thing that you're passionate about, but that's just not the reality of what owning a business is like. So that was one of the biggest things that I learned, and it's so valuable to go through, and definitely changed and paved the way that I went into my second business later on. But learned so much. And I think that like the key differences, it's sort of as you almost mentioned already, of like the lack of control versus the corporate world, feeling like not having freedom, autonomy over myself, I think is really difficult. And those were the things that really got to me with corporate. Was like I hated being told what to do every single day, and it was different too at that higher level than when you're kind of showing up to do a job. I just changed how I really felt about it. And then when you added the commuting on top of that, the amount of time I felt like I was just wasting, and just not being happy at the end of the day. that was really enough for me to not want to be there. And it was the total opposite when I started my own business, right? I felt much freer. I felt a lot more in control of myself, my time, and I felt like I could explore whatever I wanted to. Like the possibilities were endless, and that made me very happy.
I love that. It gives you that like push to start taking the reins for yourself. And of course it's going to be, extra difficult. Like there's so many learning curves along the way. And you were talking about wearing many hats and responsibilities on top of like all of the things that you do on the business side. You also have arguably the biggest and, most rewarding job ever as a mother. And I really wanted
Oh,
to ask
thank
you,
you.
because there's probably a lot of women out there who really want to learn from other moms, like how to balance, everything else on top of, raising a child. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you balance being like a founder,
Mhm.
a mom, a podcast host, and like doing everything else?
Yeah, in some ways, I'm still figuring it out. I think it's like a lifelong journey of figuring out how to make it all work together. But I have definitely learned a lot going through having multiple businesses, having a personal brand, and having a child. When I started Space Creators with my partner, we still had a baby, just a little fresh baby. And so, a funny time to want to dive into starting a new business, but there was something to it, and we decided to do that. But that was definitely hard to navigate and figure out how am I going to be good at all of these things? How am I going to be a good business owner, good at what I'm doing? How am I going to be a good mom? Like all at the same time. And there was a lot of times I'd be lying if I said I felt like that wasn't possible. It was really challenging, especially at first, to really figure out how I was going to make all of those things work. And you can be really pulled in a lot of conflicting directions when you are a parent and a business owner. And it doesn't always feel good. But over time, what I realized was that instead of trying to multitask and do it all at once, you really have to become very good at doing it all separately. So, being able to give 100% of your attention to what's in front of you is the gift, it's the solution. So, when you have your family, your kids in front of you, they have to be the priority and you have to be able to give yourself to them. And then when they're not there and you have the time to focus on business or focus on the other things, then that's to give your attention to that. I used to try to schedule meetings when my son was home and it would be a disaster and it would feel awful or it would conflict with doing his bedtime and I would always way rather be doing the bedtime. And so I had to figure out the systems, the boundaries to be able to just put them all not in a silo because in a way like you still need everything to work together, right? Like it has to be very harmonious, but it's too difficult to try to do it all at once. And so it's just figuring out how you at the same time, right? So like how you can separate things and give your full attention and give your energy to the thing in front of you. That changed everything for me.
I think that's like really good advice. Instead of like putting 100% and then like putting it in all different directions, like putting 100% of what's in front of you at the time of, like compartmentalizing sort of, and having a time and a place for everything, I think is like really good advice. Because you're right, a lot of people try and do everything all at once, which you can't do. Like you can try, but then you're not going to probably get the best results out of that. So I think it's really commendable. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a big fan of just like working moms in general. Like they make our world go round. Like it's amazing. So
Oh,
I really like.
well, thanks for saying that. It doesn't always feel like that, but it's nice to hear.
Of course, and I feel like your son will, grow up and feel the same. Like, did you do all of that? Take it all together. Like, that's crazy. But I wanted to ask, like, a little bit about Space Creators and how you and your partner Steve decided to start that. Like, what was the driving force behind it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we were in the time of the pandemic and we were a couple months in and I started to get very bored, as I think a lot of creative people do, and feeling like I needed a new challenge. I needed to be doing something. And I made the crazy decision to invest in a business mastermind during this time when I had no business. And I remember distinctly like coming down after signing up. I was upstairs in the office and came down to my partner and was like, I just signed up for this thing. And he was like, what do you mean you just signed up for this thing? Like we have no money coming in. And I was just like, I don't know. It just felt like the right decision. I just had to do it. I had to go for it. And he was ultimately very supportive, of course. But it was through that mastermind that I really started to see, okay, the shifts and changes in business as the pandemic was going on. And everyone was going online, right? Like anybody who had an in-person business was trying to figure out if they should set up an e-commerce shop. And people who had businesses online were figuring out how they could capitalize on this moment. And what I really noticed was a recurring theme of one, the people who were in the mastermind consistently talking about how much help they needed in their business and how they couldn't do it all on their own. And they were overwhelmed and they needed help with social media. They needed help to make a website with all these other skills that they didn't have. And they didn't want to do it all themselves, but they didn't know how to get the help that they needed. And at the same time, all of the guest speakers we had in that mastermind came in and talked about the importance of outsourcing in your business, and that's such a key, learning how to delegate and how to outsource in order to help continue to grow your business. So I just kept hearing this over and over again. And I thought, well, you know what? I could do that for people. I have a lot of these skills. Like I talked about starting to get them way back when I still worked in restaurants, and then doing my photography. I built a ton of skills for the digital world. And I was like, I could do this for people. I could help them. So I decided to start a virtual assisting business, and I helped people do exactly that, do their social media, do their websites, very quickly expanded into basically all things digital marketing. And I remember Steve, my partner, coming to me one day and saying, you realize the work that you're doing for your clients is digital marketing. Like you're not an assistant anymore. You're a marketer. And I was like, huh, I guess you're right. And he, at the time, also had been laid off from his job. He had a ton of experience working in sales and advertising and business development. And he kind of came to me and said, well, what if we tried to push this and build this together? And we had this really casual conversation in the kitchen where we're like, yeah, what if we did that? What if we tried it? Okay, let's try it and let's see if we could turn this into something. And just sort of like a quick handshake, like, great, let's do this. And we literally came up with the name at the same time. We're like, this could totally work. And it's been an amazing experience ever since. So it just kind of came out of a result of that, and him coming to me and saying, what if we just tried it? And now we are like 4.5 years in, and it's grown really quickly ever since.
I love that. I mean, it's so cool. Like you had it in the Instagram bio, like we're not like a regular agency, we're like a cool agency. Like I love the branding
Yeah.
about everything. I
Thank
think
you.
everything just like fell into place. What were the early days like when you guys like finally figured out, okay, let's really do this? We had a name and everything. How did you navigate like the challenges of starting a business, especially during the pandemic?
It felt really crazy. I think we quickly were like, what are we doing? This is insane. But we always liked it. And what we fell in love with in that process was just the actual process of building a business and doing that together. But there was so much learning, and especially in the early days, like, again, we didn't quite know what the full vision for like a full scale agency was going to be, but just started testing. We just started trying things. We started bringing people in. We had to hire very fast. But even when we were hiring in those early days, we didn't even know what we needed. It was like, oh, I think it would be great for us to hire an assistant. Oh, maybe we need to hire this person. And like, we're kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like we really didn't know what we needed. And a lot of our decisions weren't rooted in information, in supportive data. It was just like, let's just try stuff. And it didn't always work. So there was a lot of lessons, a lot of learning. Same thing on the client side. It was a lot of figuring out how we could actually help people. I think sometimes when we start businesses, we assume how we can help people, but we really have to go through the motions of learning and letting them show us how we can help them. So by working with so many different businesses and seeing how impact is truly made and how we actually can help people. That was a hard thing to also kind of get to know and get to learn. At the beginning, we came up with all kinds of packages and thought, well, this could be good for people. But then it turns out that didn't actually make any impact or move the needle. So being willing to be flexible and keep trying, but it was a lot of guesswork at the beginning and a lot of testing and just trying. And it's the willingness to, I think, learn from all the mistakes we made to continue to try to get better, to provide better services, make better hires, make better decisions, and just kind of persevere through all those early challenges was the thing that helped us to keep growing and keep going. But we made a lot of mistakes at the beginning.
I think that's like really great what you said about, especially with like service-based businesses. It's like you tend to assume like, oh, this would really help someone, but then no one's really like, availing of the service, right? But like you have to really be in tune to like maybe look at the data of like where can I really bridge that gap? Like what are people actually looking for? And I wanted to ask you like how you identified the specific services that Space Creators offer today. Like how did you get in tune with like the customer side and really knowing what they needed at the time?
Yeah, a lot of it was that paying attention to what people were asking for. And in the beginning, we found a lot of our business online, whether it was in Facebook groups or different like online forums where people were posting and asking for what they were looking for. And we did notice that there was a lot of similarities. In the beginning, what we really focused on a lot was websites, branding, and social media. And social media was a big one for us at the start. And we kind of did each of those things in a silo. And as time would go on, we'd be working with some people, and then they would bring up for us, like, oh, do you also do email, or would you also do SEO? And at the beginning, we didn't always do those things, but we always figured out how, and we always figured out a way. And so over time, we just ended up having a team of people who were experts in these different areas who could execute on all of those things. But it really was actively listening to what people were looking for and asking for, and not just trying to come up with everything and anything. We tried several different things though, and it didn't always work. Like I said at the beginning, we did try to sell just individual services, and we didn't have the package offerings that we have now. That's definitely come through a process of learning about, again, how we can actually make impact for people. But we would do things just individually, and we started to see that it felt really hard to prove results for people from a marketing perspective if we were just doing one thing for them. And that the more we learned, the more services we brought in house, we were able to see that when we do more things and combine different services, that more impact is actually made, more money gets brought into those businesses. And so eventually we scaled it into the offer that we have now, which is our fractional marketing team. And businesses hire us essentially as an extension of their team to act as an in-house marketing team, but we're technically out of house. And to be able to just have a certain number of hours each month where we get to focus, collectively decide where we're going to focus the energy and the efforts in marketing. So yeah, a journey to get there, but trying a lot of different things along the way.
And how would you say the vision for Space Creators changed from when you first started and how it's evolved today?
I think like the true vision, the true essence of it hasn't really changed, which is very cool to me. What we think is possible for us is the part that's changed, I think, because at the beginning, um, we didn't necessarily think that we wanted to create like a big company. We probably thought about keeping it relatively small, relatively lean, just working with a few clients. And I don't know that we necessarily even thought it was possible for us to grow a big business. So that was mindset stuff that we had at the beginning that we eventually started to work through. But the core vision of what we want to do at Space Creators is twofold. We have an internal vision for our team that is really focused around creating a space where people feel free and valued to do the work that they love. Pretty simply put, we want people to feel like they can work exclusively on what they love, what they are passionate about, what they are good at, what they can bring their best energy forward for, and not have to take on a bunch of responsibilities that don't really apply to their job or that don't really work for them. We want them to have autonomy and freedom of space. You know, all those things that I complained about from the corporate world that my partner also resonated with, and wanting to just create this environment for people where the work really added to their life instead of taking away from it. So that's the internal vision, and that's still true today, and that will probably never change. I love the model we have. I love the team that we have, the people we attract into that vision and mission. It works out great. Externally for our clients, it's kind of similar but different. The whole idea behind Space Creators is with the clients, we want to help them create space to focus on the things that they love and that they're good at. And so a lot of the times the businesses and people that will hire us, marketing isn't their strong point and branding in websites isn't their strong point. And so they are looking for someone who's an expert in that field, who can help them, who can come in and step into that role so that they can focus on growing their business and moving the needle forward. So that whole idea of creating space really applies to both the team and our clients, and just wanting people to be able to do exactly what they love.
I love that. That makes so much sense about like the name Space Creators, how it's like a dual-ended thing where it's like giving a
Yeah.
space for creators to be creative and then giving space for other businesses to do what they do best and let you take, the creative sides. I think that's really amazing.
Yeah.
I
Thank
wanted to
you.
ask you like some more leadership innovation advice. Like, how have your experiences with anxiety and burnout influenced the way you run your business today?
So much. So much. Yeah, I'm still learning and still growing through my experiences with anxiety. It's gotten a lot better for me as the more work I put into it, the better I feel, the better I do. And I haven't been burnt out in a long time. So that's a great sign. But it was going through those things that also really affirmed the mission of what we're doing for me. And I did experience these things while having Space Creators, part of growing the business. Definitely played a bit of a role in that, and learning about myself, learning about my boundaries, learning about what I need as a person and as a business owner. And everything that I went through, feeling anxiety, feeling burnout, panic attacks, they really shifted my perspective in what's important. And applying that to my business has been really important as well, because I think it's really important that everyone on my team feels the humanity of things. And I also want clients to feel that way, that, you know, things happen, experiences happen, people have anxiety, people get burnt out, people experience grief and loss. There are the list is endless of human experiences that happen while being a business owner, or while being somebody's client, or while being someone's service provider. And I just wanted to really bring that forward with me, that that should be okay. I really felt like a lot of the times when my personal experiences and my business rubbed up against each other, and it felt like it wasn't professional to have anxiety, it wasn't professional to burn out, that wasn't okay, and like it wasn't okay for my business, and my clients wouldn't understand. And after shifting my mindset around that, I realized it's very okay. And it's very human and it's very normal to have those types of experiences. Yes, even when you're successful, even when you're a big business owner, or even when you are someone's client, like these things are okay. So it's really shifted my viewpoint in that way of, what's allowed in the business space and what's professional and what's not professional, and the grace that we can give each other.
I love that saying what you just said right now, like giving yourself that grace and not shunning out like all these valid feelings that you have. And I think that's like one of the first steps, right, to getting better about it is when you finally acknowledge that I am feeling these things and I don't want to feel these things, but they're not necessarily bad. And there might be things around my environment that's leading me to feel these things. And I need to find what those things are so I can fix them instead of just like saying, oh, this is not a professional feeling. Like it's valid. Like there's a reason why you feel like that. And, there's always like things that we can do better. Especially for
Mhm.
ourselves, and just giving yourself that grace. So I really love that. And could you share with us like some strategies that you've used to maintain like having a work-life harmony while growing a business?
Absolutely, and having those kind of strategies is so instrumental and so important. I feel like we're kind of just wading in the water, or like you're trying to swim somewhere and get somewhere without a strategy, without knowing how to work through things, like you just stick there. You get stuck, right? And you can't really get anywhere. And the things that have really helped me is number one, identifying what my true priorities are, right? Because a lot of the times when we get burnt out, or business starts to feel really hard, or we feel overwhelmed, it's because we're not able to focus on the things that truly, truly matter to us, whether that is our families, whether that's children, whether that's our health and wellness. It could be anything, right? And so being able to figure out what are the things that are actually my true priorities. And I have three of them. So I like to pick three. And those three things are the most important thing to me. And I know that I need to prioritize time for them every single day. And if I don't prioritize time for them, it's not the end of the world, but I'm probably not going to be at my best. And so it's knowing that family is super important. Creativity is super important for me, and my health and wellness is very important. And if I lose sight of those priorities, then I know things are out of whack for me. So having that is important. And it made me also, like, knowing that I was giving energy to those three things made me not resent putting energy into my business. Right. So having that understanding of, okay, I am going to give myself to the things that matter, and then I will still have more to give to the business as well. That was key for me. Extending into that, and like a little bit, from it, is knowing what your true core values are. And I think that by, if you think about times in your life that you're in that rooted moment of like, yeah, this is me, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. You feel very aligned. Those are things that represent your core values. And so also knowing what those are so that you can build a business that supports those values. So let's just use an example of, if freedom is one of your core values, then you're not going to want to build a business that steals away all of your freedom, right? So knowing what the things are that can guide you from a values perspective and how to build a business around them is also really important, because you don't want to build the business and then realize that you're not actually living in your true values, right? So that also has been really, really important for me in the journey. And then honestly, it's just getting to know yourself on a really deep personal level. Sometimes I think we separate, you have to separate yourself, like I it's twofold. When you have a business, you're not the business, right? You are such a big part of the business. You're the owner. You're a very important and integral piece, but you're not the business. You're a person outside of the business. And I think getting to know yourself as deeply as possible so that you can live in a way that really supports who you truly are from an authentic perspective. If you're building a business around someone that you're not, again, values that you don't have, or even just operating in a system that doesn't truly work for you, then there's going to come a point when either you're going to burn out, or you're going to quit, or you're going to go back to corporate. And so those things are to me the most important. Those are the things that keep me grounded. That's my strategy in staying harmonious, as you said, work-life harmony.
And how do you ensure that your agency as well is following through these like strategies? Like how do you promote that culture of a healthy work life environment for your team?
Yeah, so these same strategies we use as an organization. Our organization knows what our key core values are. We also have something that is called even over statements. And those are when two hypothetically or seemingly good things rub up against each other, which happens a lot in business, having a very clear understanding of which one you would choose. And so one good example of that would be one of ours is people even over profit. So a lot of the times we might have an issue where our people are vulnerable in a situation, or there's something that's not working for them, or maybe for our clients, and we're always going to choose people even over the opportunity to make more money, right? Or choose our team's wellness before we're going to bring on a client that is really not aligned or something like that. So having that understanding, so we really operate in the same way, having core values, knowing what our mission is and our vision very clearly, knowing our priorities and knowing those even overs keeps that vision of having a healthy team alive. And our number one core value is over communication. So we communicate and then communicate again, communicate more than you think you need to about anything and everything, whether it's project related, life related. You just need some time off. Like that's all okay. Again, the human experience in my eyes is very okay. And what works from a business perspective is as long as we're communicating, then it's all fine, right? So I feel like everything, and one of my biggest passions in having a team is making sure that they are healthy and they do feel well. And they need a lot of support in that, because when you work for someone else, it's not always easy to determine that for yourself.
I love that. I feel like you really created something so different from what you experienced in your corporate life and really took those lessons and said to yourself, I'm not going to make, the people on my team feel the same way. Like you said earlier about if one of your core values is having freedom, like I feel like you wouldn't want to try and get freedom out of the people who like work with you and, try to give them as much like creative space and whatever else is their own core values. I really love that
Mm-hmm.
over communication, especially when you're working with so many people. It actually does make a lot of sense, like to kind of feel connected, right? Like you're more than just coworkers. You all work together for the same goal. So I love that over communicating. Since Space Creators is a marketing agency, I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think is like the importance of branding in today's digital landscape, and how does your agency help your clients stand out?
I mean, I think it's super important. I feel like with the way things have gone and how, everything is online. There's an online presence for most things. There's exceptions. There's some good classic brick and mortars who somehow they make it without being online, but for the most part, our world is very digital now. We are very online, and that is a visual space, right? And everything that we see and everything that we consume has a visual aspect to it online, whether it is a website or social media. And so the role that branding plays in that is so key, right? In order to show your specific brand identity, your core values as a brand, what type of brand you are, what do you feel like? Like, what does it feel like working with you, buying from you? This is all something that happens visually first. There's a lot that goes into supporting that visual identity as well. But to me, having a visual brand that stands out is so important. And as much as stands out, does a really good job of representing your business and who you are, what you stand for, and what people can really expect from you. The experience of your brand that also has to translate visually. And I feel like it's something that is very important today because, I mean, the amount of stuff that's on there, you just think about a person scrolling. I think it's what 0.2 seconds maybe that you can try have someone's attention. So having that and the ability to stop someone in their tracks through all the information that they're consuming every single day is really important. And our business really takes a big focus on that. Branding is one of the things we love the most. It's something that we're the best at. And we love helping businesses really set the foundation for their business with the brand. And we like to take it into a full strategy. The idea of having a brand is, like I just said, much more than just the visuals. The visuals are important, logos important, colors are important, fonts are important. But beyond that, what does the brand stand for? What is the brand actually doing in the world? What are we trying to achieve? Who are we trying to bring into our mission? Who are we selling to? What's the point of the whole thing? What does it sound like? It goes so much deeper than that. And I think that's where we really start to excel with our clients and helping them really set the stage of what their brand means and how it's going to function out in the world.
Well, since we're talking about branding, I wanted to ask you about your personal brands, Cool, Calm, and Rich. I wanted to get an idea of how that brand came about. What was the inspiration behind creating this space that focuses on balancing business success with personal well-being?
So, a lot based on what we were talking about and my experiences with anxiety and burnout. And what I just came to realize again, like after going through that, was that it didn't have to be that way. And that we have a deep conditioning, I feel, as a society, but especially as women in business, that we need to sacrifice ourselves for everything and that we need to come last. I used to make a joke and I think about, making a to-do list and all the things that we would write on it, but doing something for ourselves would never show up on that list, you know? It would be all the things you have to do for your business, then all the things you have to do for your family, then your friends, then the stranger you could help, all before you even show up in that mindset. And I realized that how important it is to put yourself at the top of that list has such a direct effect on your overall success. It affects how you show up in your daily life, how you show up for your family, but also for your business and for your clients. And for me, seeing that the more effort I put into how I felt personally, how I felt well or not, if I was healthy or not, actually affected how much money I made. Because the more effort that I put into myself, into feeling good, into feeling aligned, to feeling healthy, that showed up in every interaction that I had, whether it was with a team member or a client, a potential client. And the better I felt, the better I showed up, the better we did for them. And that in turn means a better experience for the clients and them referring you or working with you again. So there's a direct correlation to how successful I feel like a person can be to how much effort we put into our personal wellness. And I really want to change the narrative with Cool, Calm, and Rich that we get to define what success looks like for ourselves. And we also get to define what richness looks for ourselves. And it's a very personal journey, and that we have to stop necessarily just trying to follow what other people says is successful, that all the people who've gone before, they've been able to make it in their way, but that doesn't necessarily have to be our way. And we get to kind of pave our own pathway forwards. And that's the mission that I'm on, is just helping women see that that's possible for themselves, that they do get to have both, that you get to feel great and be really successful at the same time.
I love that because that resonates with me so much. Like, when you said putting everything else before you shouldn't be the norm anymore. Because instead of like, because you subconsciously feel that, right? When you prioritize other things over yourself, I guess that kind of will build some sort of resentment. And then you feel like, oh, I'm actually not taking the time to care for my own well being instead of
Yeah.
like really pouring into yourself and then raising everything around you up as you go. Like that should be the
Hmm.
norm. And I feel like that's what you're trying to achieve, telling, women how to do that. So I think that's like so cool, calm, and rich. I love that. So you also have a podcast of the same name. What was the vision for it? How did you get that started? Please tell me.
Yeah, the vision for it was a way to keep myself accountable to my own wellness journey when I first started. I thought, you know what, I'm going to start talking about this because one, it makes me feel better to talk about it. It keeps me more accountable to showing up and doing it again if other people are listening and hearing and being a part of it. And as I was doing that, more and more people would come forward that they felt the same way, or they were having the same experiences, or going on the same journey that I had been on. And so the more I talked about it, the more I realized that there's not enough people talking about it, and that we need to have as many conversations as possible around this because it's so needed and it's so important. And so it started in that way. And then as it continued to grow, just really saw the value in conversation. And that's when I also started to bring guests onto the show so that we could get a lot of perspectives about what's possible in this realm of personal wellness and success, and how we can make the best of both worlds. So it's been one of my favorite things that I've done. Of all the things I've done, I'm so obsessed with my own brand. And because it's just so much fun. It's so much fun making a positive impact. It's so much fun being a part of this conversation, and trying to pave the way of a new way towards success. And so I love it so much. And doing a podcast is my favorite thing.
I totally agree. And I mean, I just wanted to ask you, like, what are the things that make you feel cool, calm, and rich?
Ooh, so this is a question I ask everyone who comes on my show, and I don't know if I've answered this one before. The things that make me feel cool are, I mean, my family, my partner, my son, they're the coolest, and so being associated with them makes me feel cool. I feel cool for being a part of this conversation of like talking about success without stress, and trying to do things differently. That feels really cool to me. The things that make me calm is my commitment to my personal wellness. I like to try all the things and see what works from a wellness perspective. I love journaling, I love meditating, I love breath work, I love movement, and those things all really keep me calm, make me feel centered. And the thing that makes me feel rich is my life and my business. Like, I love both of them. They make me feel rich in the fulfillment aspect of richness. They bring all the joy, and that is what truly makes me feel rich. It's like all three of them combined too. It's just like the realization that I made of being in the present moment. And the more that I am just present, I feel the coolest, calmest, and richest of all.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, the branding, you were so right. I mean, I'm so obsessed with it as well. This is something I'm gonna try and like, imitate in my life and, really ask myself, okay, what makes me feel these things and just do that.
Mhm.
Well, could you tell me like maybe some memorable moments that you've had on the podcast so far?
What's become more memorable for me is for sure as guests have started coming on. It's been such a fun experience. I love every person that comes on the show and shares their point of view. Really memorable for me, I think of two things. One was the first time that I did an in-person interview, which was with a girl named Tamara, and she was such a fun, lively guest to have on. But just doing that first face to face interview was a very cool, pivotal moment for me. It made me realize how much more I wanted to do that, how much more I wanted to be in person with people having this conversation. And so I'm so grateful for her for being the first person to do that on the show. That really stood out for me. And then another moment was having my most notable guest on the show, which is Jacqueline Johnson. She's the founder of Create and Cultivate. She's a massive figure, especially for women in business. And she came on the show and was a guest, and it's definitely my most downloaded episode. And so that was a very big moment for me too, is just having someone kind of so influential be a guest and be a part of the conversation.
And I mean, podcasting these days has been, I don't know, just been such a boom in the industry. I feel like everyone has a podcast these days. I think that it's also very relevant because it really shows who you are. Like it's another way of like branding yourself so people can get a really close up look into like what you're really about. So I wanted to ask you like some advice for people out there who want to start their own podcast. Like what do you recommend them to start to do?
When I first started recording, and I still do this sometimes, I tried to create the least amount of barrier possible to recording the show. Sometimes starting a podcast feels very overwhelming, and you start to think, I need all the equipment. I need the best camera. I need the best lighting. I need the best microphone. And you don't need that at first. For the longest time, I simply recorded my episodes as voice notes in my phone. They sound great. They work perfectly. And so for me, it was just like, don't put barriers up to starting this show that you want to start. Just start recording, talk about the things that you really want to talk about. I like to not overthink what the episodes are going to be about. Like, share your true experiences. You don't have to overplan things, but just try not to put barriers up. Try not to make it harder for yourself than you need to, because it doesn't have to be, especially at the beginning. And you can get the fancy equipment as you go, and as you show that, yeah, actually, you do want to keep doing this podcast and I am committed to it, then go for it, right? Invest in all the stuff. But at the beginning, just make it easy.
I love that because I totally understand like when people think, oh, I got to get the best tech. Like it's really about the content. It's really about what you say
Yes.
and the messaging behind the podcast that really makes that like impact. I feel like if you were really saying
Hmm.
something so valuable, it doesn't really matter if people are seeing you or just hearing you. That in itself is the real
Yeah.
impact. So I love that. And just one last question for about the podcast. Like, what do you hope your listeners can take away from each episode of the Cool, Common, Rich podcast?
I hope that they can identify themselves in what we talk about and be able to see that they're not alone in their experiences, that the things that they feel and that they experience as business owners is very normal. And that when you often feel so isolated in what you're going through, especially the hard stuff, that it's not true, and that everybody faces those same challenges, and that there's a way forward, and that there's a way to do things differently. I hope that people really can listen to the show and feel affirmed in themselves, that they can trust themselves to make the best decisions for them.
I'm gonna make sure to link the Cool Common Rich podcast in our description later so everyone can like listen into your episodes. I feel like it's gonna be, really a great way for, other women who might be watching right now and want to learn from you. So I'll be sure to link that down below. I also wanted to
Thank
get
you.
your advice. What would you say to other working moms out there who are really trying to balance entrepreneurship and motherhood?
Mhm. I would say stop trying to be perfect at everything. I would say give yourself a ton of grace that you really are doing the best that you can. Don't feel bad when one thing doesn't feel right. Know that you can fix it. Get in touch with what matters to you the most. For a lot of moms, I know that's our kids. And so don't lose sight of that. Remember that they get to be a priority in your business journey, and that you don't have to sacrifice time with them to be successful.
And I wanted to ask you, obviously, like, what are the vibes looking like for the next few years? What's next for Space Creators, the podcast? Are there any new projects or services on the horizon?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm always excited and always thinking about the future and what's possible. With Space Creators, we're continuing to grow. We're trying to become a massive agency to make big impact with big brands and have a huge team that supports. So we're just continuing that growth journey. We love where we're at. We love our offer, and we're just going to continue to grow that. Keep working with amazing people. In terms of Cool, Common, Rich, things are going so great with the brand, and I'm now just starting to transition to doing more and more in-person events. I have a retreat that is coming up in January, first retreat in collaboration with another group called High Vibe Women, where we are bringing together the two worlds of business and personal wellness in a weekend experience. So I'm going to be doing a lot more things like that, planning more retreats, We're already thinking about the second one that will be happening on the West Coast, and starting to see how I can expand the community. And so that's going to be my really big focus over the next little while, is expanding how I can make impact with that brand.
Could you leave us any like final words of advice for all of our listeners out there? Maybe a way for them to cultivate being cool, calm, and rich in their mindset. Anything you'd like to say before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with this idea is a lot of times, and especially if you feel stuck or you are in a state of burnout, it feels like it's not possible for you. And I just want to assure whoever's listening, and if you feel that way, that feeling cool, feeling calm, feeling rich, having success without stress is possible for everyone. And it's about being able to get past that limiting belief that it doesn't apply to you, because it does.
Thank you so much, Jeanette, for today. Like, I feel cooler, calmer, and richer already just talking to you. And I feel like I hope everyone else feels the exact same way. And I'll be make sure to link everything about the
Thank you.
agency and your podcast in our description so people know how to find you. And I appreciate you so much for being here today. This has been so great. Of course, thank you to everyone who has taken the time to grace our podcast. And thank you so much for being here. To everyone who's listened today, this has been your host, Patricia. And remember, for all your professional, business, and technical writing needs, there's only one way to go, and that's with the right direction. See you guys soon. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you.